Recently, Brad woke up in the middle of the night, feeling a tremendous joy over our discovery that Edgar Cayce had the same cornerstone for his life. There is a river. We learned some things since we last spoke of Edgar Cayce. That from the time he was a boy, he went to the river or the creek near his home in Kentucky whenever he needed spiritual solace or inspiration. He was a river boy. When he was 13 years old, he built himself a little lean-to, a little shelter out of willow in the woods near where the creek bends. He would go there to read his Bible. He read the Bible every year when he was a child. And one afternoon, he was there reading the Bible, and he became aware of the presence of someone else. He looked up and saw a woman was standing before him. And at first he thought perhaps it was his mother who'd come to fetch him. But then she spoke, and he realized it was not his mother. The woman's voice was soft and very clear. It reminded him of music. And she said, "Your prayers have been heard. Tell me what you would like most of all, so that I may give it to you." And then, as he looked at her, he saw something on her back, something that made shadows behind her shaped like wings, and he was frightened. But she smiled at him, waiting for his response. He opened his mouth and heard himself say, "Most of all, I would like to be helpful to others, and especially to children when they are sick." When he said this, he was thinking of Jesus and the disciples. He wanted to be like a disciple. And then suddenly, the woman was no longer there. He looked at the place where she stood, and she was gone. Well, he went home and told his mother, because he was uncertain what to make of it, and she comforted him. And said it sounds like it was a gift from God. Well, the next day, Edgar was struggling with his lessons at school because he wasn't a very good student, and he was up late at night with his father, and in a moment of great exasperation, he heard the woman's voice say to him, "If you can just sleep a little bit, just go to sleep for a little bit, we can help you." So he laid his head down on his book and fell asleep, and he woke up knowing everything inside of it. And that was the first day that Edgar discovered that going into a special kind of sleep was his means, his gift for accessing the river. And several times throughout the rest of his life, this woman's voice would come and assist him. So that was the first river story for Edgar Cayce.
So after Edgar Cayce's biography that was signed with those words that we've shared with you, after it arrived in the mail, we found that there were several times in his life when he felt gripped by fear, real fear, that others might not see him in the right way. They won't see me in the right manner. As a child, he was worried about telling others of his non-ordinary experiences. As a young adult, he feared exploring any spiritual matters outside his comfort zone, especially when it involved esoteric topics not mentioned in the Bible. Later, fearing bankruptcy, legal charges, and even going to jail for giving medical advice without a license to do so. Several times, Cayce even questioned whether his gift was from the devil.
One of our favorite stories about Cayce took place when he was 18 years old. He was living on a farm and lost track of the family cow. He went out to look for it at dawn and came to a river. There he saw a man sitting on the river bank in prayer. It turned out that it was the famous evangelist Dwight L. Moody, who was actually a hero to Brad's grandfather and father, who were preachers.
Say it.
Young Cayce and the elder Moody struck up a conversation and agreed to meet in the same spot for several mornings because Reverend Moody was in town in Hopkinsville to conduct a revival. Hundreds and hundreds of people from all over came to see him speak. And yet each morning he agreed to meet Edgar at dawn. Cayce told Reverend Moody about his visions, which was a brave thing to do. And he told him that he had read at this point the Bible 18 times, one for each year of his life. Cayce was simply in love with God and nature and in love with mystery. And he met his match in Reverend Moody, who also shared with him his passion for religion. It was a remarkable thing, actually, that he spent those mornings with that famous preacher. Changed his life.
Years later, after Cayce started doing those medical readings, an educated man asked Mr. Cayce to do a reading on himself. Hey, Edgar, why don't you do a reading on you to discover why you were given this rare power and what mission, what creed is ahead. Now, we told you a little bit about that story last week, didn't we? But it's ready to be said again so it can convey its mystery. Let's tell it again with some additional remarks.
Well, Cayce was reluctant to do this reading on himself. He wasn't sure that he actually wanted to find out what this power was, in case it really was from the devil. He had a lot of uncertainty. So he said, "Give me a night. I need to sleep on it," as they say. But he didn't sleep. Instead, he left his hotel room and took a long walk. And he came to a bridge over a river. He stood in the middle, alternating between looking up at the evening stars and looking down at the water, seeing their reflection below. And after some time, an old man in work clothes, much like in Brad's dream, came up and asked him for a light. He could tell the man had alcohol on his breath. The man lit the cigarette and walked away. And in that trail of smoke, Edgar Cayce heard a voice tell him his mission.
Feed the sheep. Love God. And love others. There are many mansions, many rooms, many halls in my cosmos. In my mansion, there are many rooms. Now, when Cayce went back to his hotel room and opened the Bible, that was next to his bed, he found this passage from Psalm 46:4. staring at him. There is river, the streams whereof shall make glad the city of God. There is a river. There is a river. There is a river.
So three times, Cayce found life direction at the river. And this particular passage from Psalms became the title of his biography, the one that he authorized by Thomas Sugrue. Recently during the night, Brad felt excitement pour from the way this verse touched Cayce's life and touched our guild. Brad felt in the middle of the night transported back to the riverbank where Cayce visited Reverend Moody. There, in visionary time and space, Brad caught the sacred emotion that flowed through their conversation. He felt as if he were there with the two of them.
That's right. That night, just recently, I was unexpectedly thrown back. Thrown back to Cayce's first discovery of a passion for the Bible, the Holy Book. It happened when he heard a black field worker discuss the strength of Samson, somebody working on a field assignment. I think he was lifting a very heavy stone. That's right, he was lifting a very heavy stone. This black man said, "Edgar, do you know about Samson? Let me tell you about the strength of Samson." The young Cayce, as a boy, listened and enjoyed it very much. And he ran home and he said, "Mama, Dada, or Daddy and Mommy, Dad and Mom, hey you, can I have a Bible? I'd love to have a Bible. I want to know more about that. I want to hear more of those kind of stories."
So every night for a week, Brad actually found himself in and out of vision, accompanying Edgar Cayce as a boy, remembering what it was like to love God and religion when he was young. Brad, too, at one point thought that perhaps he would be a preacher or a missionary, just like young Edgar Cayce did.
But that was not the mission.
It was not the mission
specified by the Creole. So in the vision, I read the Bible with Edgar Cayce when he was a boy, and I felt the joy move through him like it had for me as a child, hearing those stories in church, Sunday school, tools of the ministry of the sisters, brothers, dadas, mamas, of the heat, ready to meet in the field and lift the stone, sing the tone of the cornerstone. There is a river, walk on its holy, holy water.
There is a river.
Yes, there is a river. Let's walk on that water. Come on, walk on the water. Everybody, stand up. Walk. Wow. Walk on the water. 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 Because there's a river. There's a river. So I felt that extraordinary joy. In those nightly meetings, every night I would dream that I was hanging out with Edgar Cayce by the stream, enjoying the Bible and praying a bit. I felt the joy of that nightly meeting with Cayce. And we seemed to travel together through his childhood and adolescence, finally returning to his meeting with Reverend Moody. He was in the right kind of mood. Had the joy, he felt the river, and he was a water walker. And then I remembered I grew up surrounded by preachers like Reverend Moody, and evangelists and missionaries who stayed with us when they preached the revivals. Hanging out with Edgar Cayce by the river. Get in the right moody. Get yourself in the right moody. Moody, sacred emotion.
Well, Brad also felt some fear about following his mission and had to stand at one crossroads after another, because it is not easy for someone to accept their destiny. It's not easy to accept whatever your Creod and God have in store for you. And I think it's true partly for everyone that we tend to underestimate the gifts that we have and often look outward to others and compare ourselves, and so often we just take for granted what comes naturally to our Creod. And Cayce felt inadequate because he had no high school education. They did not have the money to send him to school past a certain grade. So he longed to enter the seminary, but it just was not in the cards. It would be many years before he realized that he had a different link to knowledge. And of course, that was different for you. Because you certainly had a lot of education.
Yes, I had so much education. But I only learned that it largely offered misdirection, especially in matters of psychology and the professions concerned with helping others. But I also had to find a different link to a wisdom born of standing in the middle of the sacred vibration that created whatever emanation and liberation was needed for a given situation.
Well, at the end of this week of moving in and out of vision and sharing that joy with Edgar Cayce, of his passion for the river that he had when he was a boy, Brad had another unexpected dream.
I was in Switzerland! Chocolates everywhere! I wish. I was in Switzerland in a doctor's waiting room. And the doctor invited me back to his office, where he proceeded to ask questions and explore the meaning of my dreaming. Tell me about your dreams. Let's explore. Let's interpret what they mean.
Well then, in the dream, Brad fell asleep and then woke up with no memory of what had been said. He felt a bit like Edgar Cayce, who did the same. When he would give a reading, Edgar Cayce would fall asleep and wake up with no memory of what had been said.
Poor Edgar never remembered, never really experienced his gift. So I felt such a deep sadness for the way he had to cross the river by falling asleep. But I understood it was the only way to block interference, from the kind of educated thinking that explains the working of every psyche and any presumed psychic. In the dream, I felt very wobbly, shitty, and found it so difficult to walk. But somehow, I made it back to the reception room. There, I thought I woke up, though I was still dreaming. Somehow, I felt as if something had struck my body and soul to remind me of who I am.
Well, next, Brad recognized the doctor as Carl Jung. You've heard of Carl Jung, founder of a therapeutic method that places a high value on the psychological interpretation of dreams. And Brad felt a sadness also for him, like he did for Edgar Cayce, because Jung largely missed the sacred ecstasy that awakens and fires up the soul in favor of staying rather inside a head trip. An unseen force then spoke what Brad immediately forgot but then would later remember.
Jung needed Edgar Cayce to take him on a river walk where he'd learn how to pray. Cayce needed to fall asleep to avoid hearing anyone like Carl Jung lead him away from the Psalms, the river, and the crossing to the unconscious steps of Holy Communion. Holy Communion.
Still dreaming, Brad recalled how we had discussed really the sad irony, how contemporary spirituality really adopted Edgar Cayce and took him out of his room, the context of his life, and they portrayed him as the father of New Age spirituality. He's often called a psychic, although, as an author named Harmon Brough pointed out, and this man, by the way, attended Edgar Cayce's Sunday school classes, because Edgar Cayce, because he was not able to become a preacher, he continued to teach Sunday school all his life. This man, Harmon Brough, reported that Cayce never encouraged anyone to be a psychic or medium or any particular New Age seeker. He only advised love and service guided by prayer and heartfelt devotion to God. This made Cayce more like a Bushman doctor than what we would consider a seer or a medium or a psychic. Above all else, he coached people how to pray, and according to Brough, was responsible for over 80 people becoming missionaries just in Alabama alone. He strongly insisted that he had no relationship with discarnate spirits. Cayce was only filled with the Holy Spirit and saw in the sunlight of divine care and wisdom.
The multitudes interested in Edgar Cayce's extraordinary gifts. All those many people so fascinated, so curious about Edgar Cayce's gifts. They usually ignore, or they are blind to the room, to the river he frequented. Only preferred cutouts are extracted, like mention of reincarnation, or Atlantis, or a certain kind of strange treatment for a disease. Few ever bother to look at what should be the higher and vaster emphasis, the vastest emphasis, how Cayce had lived his life, that is, the room he lived in, and the river he tapped into. Pay attention to the river.
To the river.
There is a river.
Walk on water. Several nights later, Brad dreamed that he was in a vast concert hall, theater, or some kind of lecture auditorium, and the room was dark. He heard the ambient sound, a reverberation like you hear in Carnegie Hall before a performance. Brad woke up, startled by the striking sonic atmosphere of this unseen big room. Later, he dreamed he was taken back to that mysterious place. And this time, the light was on. But the sound quality was still so extraordinary that Brad did not bother to look anywhere around him in the space. He threw his whole attention to hearing with heightened reception, and then he heard a voice speak.
Tell Hugh Lynn it is now aligned.
Hugh Lynn was the name of Edgar Cayce's son, who managed the institution that was built to conserve Edgar's readings. The Association for Research and Enlightenment, it's called ARE, in Virginia Beach. As soon as Brad heard those words in the dream, he immediately understood them.
By recently emphasizing the room and the river of Cayce's life, rather than any extracted part of it, led to an alignment of his readings with the source and the force from which they came. The readings arose from a man who practiced deep religious devotion. The sound of Cayce's voice in his prophetic sleep then rang through the air. See.
Well, this acoustic jolt woke Brad up. And then he had a third and final dream. Brad was sent back to the same room. But this time he did not miss taking a good look around. He realized he was in the mystical library. The library of feelings, as we sometimes call it. All kinds of numbers were floating in the air in front of him. These were felt to be references associated with Edgar Cayce's readings.
There was a pervasive sense of peace, that everything was rightly sorted and housed, and housed, and how it was housed. The readings had been aligned with Cayce's sacred emotion, his room of devotion and higher exploration.
We invite you to catch his love for holiness, his love for the river, and realize that he fed on Scripture as holy bread. In Brad's visionary walks to the river with Edgar Cayce in Dream, there was only love flowing from that body of water. All else was secondary and relatively unimportant by comparison to that river.
Come on, let's walk to the river and pray with and like Edgar Cayce. Feel the sacred emotion. Wash away all the interference. Stick it. Removing whatever gets in the way of your having a relationship with the force and the source of creation.
Come on, everyone. Let's walk on water. Be a water walker, doing so in action rather than only by talk alone.
There is a river.
Yes, there is a river. And to feel its holy shiver, we must be humble like Cayce, choosing the right house or hules for our lives, desiring only to love God and be of service to others.
Shemaka, wake up, wake up.